Hi, everybody. We're sorry if you couldn't make it to the class on Thursday. Unfortunately, we couldn't get an announcement out in time. Uh, but we're glad you're here ready to learn to code, and we hope you can come to some classes in the future. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. So the first thing you're going to want to do is download the text editor we'll be using, and there's a video on how to do this already up on the same YouTube channel you're watching this on. So I'd recommend, if you haven't done so yet, go ahead, pause the video here, go and download Atom, and then just come back and we'll move right along. Alright, now that you've downloaded Atom, we're going to quickly go over what that is. I think it goes over in the other video a little bit, sort of what it is. But basically it's the text editor that we're going to be using for programming, and it's basically, it just makes programming easier, and it makes your code easier to see and understand by color coding it and doing all the indenting, and uh, it solidifies the hierarchy and makes it a lot cleaner looking. So the first thing we've got is this simple program, and now what this is going to look like is when you open up this file, helloworld.html, you're going to open it up in your browser, whether that's Chrome, Safari, God forbid Internet Explorer. It's going to display the text "Hello World" with an exclamation mark at the end in 16-point Times New Roman. And you may have changed your default text size or font, but for now we're going to assume that you haven't, and so it's going to be 16-point Times New Roman. Now I'm going to quickly run through what each of these pieces mean. You may have figured out that between those P's, that's where the actual text is that's displayed, right? That's where it says what I said it would say. So, but we're going to start from the top for now. The exclamation point doctype HTML with the sideways carets around it, that declares the document as an HTML file. And we'll talk about what HTML is in just a second. So the next one, the HTML between those brackets, is saying this is where the HTML file starts. And then the header tag, we're not going to worry about that for now. The body tag, that's where all the stuff that you put on your website is going to go, is between those body tags. Everything that is on your website that the user will see, with a few more advanced exceptions, but for the most part, everything that your user will see will be between those two body tags. Now, the P stands for paragraph, actually, and we'll talk about that more later on down the slideshow. And then between those two P things, it says "Hello World." That's the text that will be displayed. Now, each of these little things, so the P or the body or the head or the HTML, they're all called tags. And for each opening tag, you need a closing tag. And a closing tag, in just about every case, is the exact same as the opening tag, except that it has a slash before it. So you can see there's the P opening tag and then the P closing tag. And every tag you open, it's good practice to close. You don't always have to close it to make it work, but it's good practice, and it helps you write good code. So you can go ahead and type this up, and if you want to, you can save it as helloworld.html on your desktop, and then you can double click it, open it up, and then what'll happen is it'll open up in your browser and it'll display that 16-point hello world that I was talking about. So for you to be any kind of web developer, even just an amateur knowing the basics, you should understand at least the fundamentals of how the internet works. Now, I've sort of adopted this to sort of a modern graphic. A little while ago this would have been different, but this is closer to how it works today. So there are servers, which are the things all the way over on the right. They're the little 3 bars. And then there are routers. Those are the things with the antenna sticking up. And then there are the clients. Those are the computers that you probably recognize that image. Now, the actual internet is the red line going down the middle. It's oversimplified. It is a connector. That's all it really is. It's just a cable that runs all this stuff together and facilitates the transfer of files. So now an HTML file is essentially a web page. Most web pages run on some form of an HTML file. Now we'll talk more about that in just a second, but I'm going to show you sort of the path of an HTML file. So HTML files are stored on servers, which, as you'll remember, are all the way over on the far right. They're the 3 bars. And then they go to the internet, and then they are picked up by your router, right? And then your router transfers them to your computer, the client. And so that's the path that the HTML file takes. But actually what happens is the client sends a request to the server through the router saying, hey, I want this file. Then the server sends the file back. And then the client, the computer, sends an OK message back to the server. Okay, so you may be wondering, how is it when the HTML file gets to the client, your computer, how does your computer know what to do with that? And that's where a browser comes in. Now the browser, we talked about sending requests to the server. The browser is actually what sends the request to the server. And it goes through your router to the server, and then all the rest of that happens. Now, your browser, so you might be using Chrome, you might be using Firefox, maybe Internet Explorer, maybe even Opera, maybe Safari, right? Now, the file is going to come to your computer from the server, and then your browser is going to take that file and read it and display it as it's supposed to be displayed. Okay, so now we actually get to start talking about HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and basically it defines what's going to be on the web page. It doesn't really as much cover how those things look. That's CSS. We'll get to that later. But HTML sort of it defines everything and exactly what everything is. Now, HTML, just to clarify, it's not actually technically a programming language. It's a markup language, as it says in the name. And the difference is that almost no logic is executed with HTML. Very little logic is executed or processed. And this is because HTML, like I said, is primarily to just show elements. And that's about it. Now, HTML, as we talked about before, is primarily based on tags, and those are those open bracket, close bracket things that you saw. Now, there are over 100 tags. Don't freak out. There are very few people who take the time to memorize all of those because there are lots of great free references all over the web. So don't freak out about that. You don't have to know all of them. In fact, I'd say you really only need to know 30 or 40 of them to be able to code efficiently. And really, you just sort of have to know how they work to be able to code in general, because you can use those incredible references. Now, let's go over tags one more time. Remember, they have to be opened and then they have to be closed. If you don't do that, it's bad code and it might mess up your website. And if you don't know why, that's something you should look at when you're troubleshooting. Now, we're going to go over 2 tags here, the paragraph tag and the header tag. Now, the paragraph tag we talked about before, that'll all of the text between those the opening and the closing paragraph tag is going to be displayed at the default font unless you style it using CSS, which we're not going to get into right now. So that's just going to be displayed with your browser's default font, and on every browser that I know of, that's 16-point Times New Roman. Now you can go into your browser preferences and change this, but most people don't even know that, and so generally it's safe to assume that it's going to be 16-point Times New Roman. Now the header tags, they're slightly different, right? Are the heading tags, and they show headers. So everything that's between the opening and closing heading tag is going to be bolded and bigger text. Now there are 6 different heading tags. There's H1 through H6. H1 is the biggest, H2 is a little bit smaller, H3 is a little bit smaller, H4 is a little bit smaller, H5 is a little bit smaller, and then H6 is the smallest, right? That is pretty logical. Now, I actually made a mistake here. No, what am I talking about? I didn't make a mistake. I did that on purpose so you would notice and point it out, and you would learn from it. When I was typing this up, I didn't really go back and double check any of this. I just did it really quickly, and I made a mistake. This H1 tag is actually matched by a closing P tag. Now that's wrong. It should be matched by a closing H1 tag. So on line 10, the second tag, the closing tag, that should be the open bracket / H1 and then the closing bracket. I did that so you would notice it. That was not a mistake, not at all. Yeah, so I mean, programming is all about finding and avoiding and correcting little mistakes, because things like that will mess up your whole website and you'll have no idea why. And you might have a 300 line long website and you're scrolling through 300 lines looking for that. And so you just have to be very careful when you're doing that, and clearly I wasn't careful enough. Now, to expand on tags a little bit, some tags have these things called attributes. Now, attributes are things that give sort of an extra meaning to the tag. So you'll see the first tag with an attribute up here is, is the HTML tag, the first tag. You can add attributes to any tag, really. For some tags, there are some common or even required tags for the tags to work as intended. Now, for this HTML tag, I put the attribute lang, which, as you may have guessed, stands for language, and then I set that equal to English or US English, and that's that code EN English US English. Pretty straightforward there. Now, the A tag down here, an A tag defines a link. So wherever you see an A tag, all of the text between two A tags will be that blue with the underline that you have seen and are so familiar with. Now, the attribute required for that is what's called the href. And that is essentially where the link is going to take you. So in this case, it's going to our club website, which I highly encourage you to go ahead and go check out when you have a minute, when you're finished with this lesson, whenever. It's pretty cool. Andrew McCullough made it, and creds to him on that. It's really great. Go check it out. So if you click on go check out our club website, when that comes up in your browser, it's going to take you to dragontech.club. Now the next tag is the img tag, or as it's more commonly referred to, the image tag, because it displays an image. Now this image actually shows Ron Swanson heroically basking in the glory of America. Now the first attribute you'll see on any image tag is the source attribute, and that's going to be the URL where the image is. Now you can store that locally, which is a bit more complicated. You can store that on your website, and a lot of times you'll see that on professional websites, or you can just go to the internet and grab a link. That's that thing that you've never used. If you right-click on the image, click copy link, That's that annoying thing that you sometimes do accidentally. Well, now you actually have a place to put that. And so this will go and grab that image from this URL, and it'll display that image on the page. Now the alt text, section 508 of, I think it's the Americans with Disabilities Act, something like that. It actually requires this on professional websites. And don't worry if you forget on an image, no one's going to come after you, right? It's sort of loosely enforced, but it's good practice. Now, what it is it's alternative text. So if for some reason the image can't be displayed, it'll show that text instead. Now, the reason this is involved with the Americans with Disabilities Act is because there are special programs that blind people can use that will read websites to them. And, obviously you can't read, you can't say an image, right? That program can't say the image. So what it'll do is it'll look for the alt text, and if the alt text is there, it'll read that alt text, and so that enables that blind person to know what that image is. So now we're gonna look at this example web page. I picked this website out especially because, or this article out especially because I like the title. And here we go, it's loading. And excuse my slow internet. But you might as well butter him because Trump is toast. Apparently, he has digging his own grave. That's what this article says. We're not going to go through and read the whole thing. What I want to show you is an interesting tool you may or may not have discovered. I happen to be using Firefox here, but this is a tool on every browser that I know of that's pretty easy to access. You, at least on Firefox, you right-click, and you can go to Inspect Element. And what that does is it actually pulls up the code, the HTML code, for the entire page. Now you can see here's the beginning. You see the exclamation point doctype HTML. Every single HTML file that you ever create needs to be started with that, unless they update the standards. But don't worry about that for now. Every HTML file you ever create will be started with exclamation point doctype HTML. Look, even they're doing it. Now they've got a little bit of extra stuff here. Just don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. You can see here's their opening HTML tag. They happen to have not put the language attribute here, but on a lot of websites you'll see that. And generally it's good practice, so that if you're using the translate feature on Google Chrome or something, if you've got the translate extension, then it'll recognize the language much more easily, much more accurately. Now here's the header tag. We're not now excuse that potentially bad jump cut, but my mom texted me and that dinged and showed up on the screen, so I had to cut out that. So the head tag we're going to ignore for now. We'll get to that in a later lesson. Now the body tag, this is where all the stuff goes, right? If you remember, this is where all the stuff goes. Now we're going to go ahead and come down here. Let's see, where are we? It'll highlight where we are. Okay, so this seems to be where all the good stuff is. So we're going to go ahead and open that. All right, let's look for the highlight. There's the highlight. All right, so it looks like here's where we want. We want to see if we can find any of those tags that we just talked about, the A tag, the image tag, or the header tags, or the paragraph tag. Now, let's see. Where might this be? Nope, nope. Okay, well, it's not highlighting for either of these. So let's just open up this, see if that's right. Oh, that is right. So sometimes you just have to do a little guesswork. Let's open this up. Let's see where we're going. All right, right here. Keep going here. Okay. Hey, look at that. We found one. We recognize that. That's an H2 tag. Look at that. And they even closed it right. So they're better than me. That's good. They're professional web developers. Hopefully they are. Look, H2 tag. That's right up here. Look, H2. Now they've used CSS to style this, so obviously that's not Times New Roman, but we're going to talk about how to do that in a later lesson. Let's see what else we can find. Now, all right. this seems to be the big part of the article, the main part of the article. Wait, did I see? Look at all these p tags. Look at those. Those are all paragraphs. We know what every single one of those things does. That's great. We can click on one of these, it'll expand it. Look, here's the text right there. The cool thing to do, HTML is run on the client side, and that's because your browser takes that HTML file and runs it, and it doesn't actually ever send anything back to the server that the server will permanently save. So what you can do is you can come in here, and this doesn't harm the website at all. You can edit this HTML. You can change it to whatever you want. Trump is stupid. Mexico will never pay for a wall. And then you can go ahead and hit enter, or whoops, just click out of that, excuse me, and wow, look at that. That's pretty cool, right? You can trick your friends into thinking that you can hack websites just like that. So there's your p tag. Let's look for something else. Maybe here. Hey, an image tag. Look, there's the source, and there's the alt text. Now they've got a couple other things in here. Width and height, you can probably figure out what those are. Those are measured in pixels. Class we're going to talk about later. But yeah, I mean, you can go through this, and you can recognize a lot of this. Now, we're going to go into a lot more detail about this later, but all of these div things that you're seeing, those just essentially organize the website and divide it into neat little boxes, and it's good coding practice to put those in, and we'll talk in a lot greater detail about those later. So there's the example web page, and now you guys should go and practice. You should have Atom installed. Even if you don't, you can use TextEdit or Notepad or whatever you've got if you've got Linux, and go ahead and make a website. You know how to do it. You can come back to this video and look at the previous slides for the frame that you need to set up and the basic structure of the web page. Use the p tag, use the h1 through 6 tags, use the a tag with the href attribute, use the image tag with the source and the alt text attribute, and go ahead and practice. You know how to do this. So just if you want to bring to class what you've created, feel free, and hopefully we'll see you on Thursday. Now, here is a slight postscript. Here are some good resources for you if you want to learn a little bit more. These will become a lot more useful to you as you progress further in your coding career. W3 Schools is great. HTML Dog is great. Stack Overflow is another great one. I would stay away from that one for now, though, because it's more advanced and it's a forum, and people on forums tend to assume that you know everything, so or that at least that you know exactly what they know. So that might be a little confusing to you if you go and try and do something on there. So I would stay away from that one, but certainly in the future, as you learn a little bit more, that's a great place to go. So thank you all for watching this. If you've made it this far, good job. And hopefully we'll see you next Thursday.